It was supposed to be just another quiet afternoon in Washington, D.C. Nothing more than a familiar walk home after school. The sky was soft with spring light and cherry blossoms fluttered like confetti along the sidewalk. Nia Roberts, a 19-year-old black student with a bright future ahead of her, had her headphones in and her mind elsewhere. Just days earlier, she had received two life-changing pieces of news: a full-ride scholarship to Georgetown University and an official acceptance into the CIA's elite youth outreach internship program. Her heart still hadn't stopped racing from the moment she opened that letter. It was the culmination of everything she'd worked for: countless late nights, studying Saturdays spent at debate competitions instead of parties, and summers volunteering in community leadership programs. Her mother, Camille, had cried when she read the letter aloud in their kitchen. Nia remembered the pride in her mother's voice, the trembling in her hands as she whispered, "You're going to change this world, baby." As she walked that afternoon, her backpack swayed gently with each step. Inside it was the laminated CIA internship badge she had tucked away safely in a side pocket. She hadn't shown it to anyone at school yet, partly because she had been warned to keep it discreet, and partly because it still didn't feel real. She was just a teenager from Southeast DC, raised by a single mom taught to speak clearly, dress modestly, and never give anyone a reason to assume the worst. Georgetown had always been her dream, and now the CIA internship. That was more than a dream. It was a door opening to a future she hadn't dared to imagine. Her mind buzzed with thoughts of what was coming next: dorm life policy classes, maybe even fieldwork after graduation. She could already hear her debate coach telling the rest of the team, "See, that girl's going to make history." But dreams have a way of colliding with reality, and sometimes that collision is violent. As she rounded a quiet corner on her usual route home, a patrol cruiser slowed beside her. The tires scraped gently against the curb. She pulled out one of her earbuds, confused but calm, until she saw the looks on their face: tight jaws, cold eyes, and a sharpness that didn't match the setting sun. Sergeant Donnelly, an older white officer with a red face and heavy step, opened the driver's door. Beside him, Officer Blake, younger and lean, rested one hand near his holster. "Hey, stop right there," Donnelly barked. Nia froze, not out of guilt, but out of instinct. Her mother had drilled it into her since she was 9. If the police stop you, you stay still, speak clearly. Don't run, don't argue, and never ever reach for anything too fast. Her hands hovered midair as she turned to face them. "Is something wrong, officers?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. "You match the description of a robbery suspect," Blake said flatly, already circling her like a shark. Nia blinked. "Robbery? No, I just got out of school. I'm heading home." Donnelly ignored her words entirely. "Turn around, hands behind your back." "Wait, what?" Nia stammered, heart pounding. "I swear I haven't done anything wrong. I can show you my ID. I have a CIA." But he wasn't listening. Before she could finish her sentence, rough hands grabbed her wrists and jerked them behind her. The metal cuffs snapped into place with a cold final click that sent a jolt of fear through her spine. Her backpack dropped to the sidewalk with a dull thud, spilling a notebook and a protein bar. Blake rifled through it, uninterested in her explanations. Then he pulled out the badge. "What the hell is this?" Nia swallowed hard. "It's my CIA internship badge," she said. "I was just accepted. There's a program." Donnelly scoffed. "Sure you were," he muttered, waving the badge like it was some kind of joke. "High school kids don't intern for the CIA." "It's real," Nia whispered, her voice cracking. "I swear." But they weren't interested in the truth. They were interested in the narrative they had already written in their minds. And in that narrative, Nia wasn't a future Georgetown student or a federal intern. She was a suspect, a threat, a black girl in a hoodie walking alone. They shoved her into the back seat of the cruiser as bystanders looked on silently. No one intervened. No one asked questions. In seconds, the sidewalk where her dreams had bloomed turned into the first page of a nightmare. Her mother didn't know. Her school didn't know. All Nia knew was that in the blink of an eye, her badge, her future, and her identity had been reduced to something suspicious, something dangerous. As the cruiser pulled away from the curb, the badge slipped from the officer's hand and landed beside her on the seat. She stared at it, her hand still cuffed, her pulse racing, and the crushing realization settling in. She had been seen not for who she was, but for what the world assumed she must be. And that was only the beginning. The inside of the patrol car was cold and sterile, a sharp contrast to the warmth of the afternoon sun she just left behind. Nia sat silently, wrists burning from the too tight cuffs, heart still thudding in her chest like a warning bell. She stared at the back of Sergeant Donnelly's head, trying to will herself not to cry. She could not hear, not in front of them, not when they already thought she was guilty. As the cruiser pulled away from the curb, her mind raced. Was this really happening? Would they call her school, check her ID? Look inside that badge. It had her name, her clearance level, a signed authorization from the CIA's youth program. Surely someone would look. Someone had to. But at the precinct, hope disappeared quickly. She was marched into the building without a word. No one asked her name. No one offered an explanation. A female officer took her fingerprints and her photo, then led her to a bare holding cell with cinderblock walls and a cold steel bench bolted to the floor. When Nia asked for water, the woman didn't even respond. Her request to call her mother was dismissed with a wave of the hand. "You'll get your call when we're done," someone had said. But no one ever came back. Minutes dragged into hours. The windowless room was lit by a flickering fluorescent light overhead, buzzing faintly in the silence. She sat curled on the bench, her hoodie damp with sweat, her hands trembling in her lap. Her stomach twisted painfully from both hunger and fear. The world outside kept moving. School would have ended by now. Her mom would be wondering why she wasn't home, and the badge, that symbol of everything she'd worked for, was probably still in Donnelly's pocket, being laughed at behind closed doors. Eventually, the heavy door creaked open. Officer Blake stepped in with a file in hand and the same smug expression he'd worn hours earlier. "Come on," he said. "Interrogation room." She followed him down the narrow hallway, the cuffs digging into her wrist with each step. When they entered the room, Donnelly was already there, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. A metal table stood in the center of the space with two mismatched chairs on either side. Nia was pushed into one of them. "You know why you're here," Donnelly said flatly, not even waiting for her to sit properly. "I honestly don't," she replied, her voice low but steady. "I didn't rob anyone. I was at school." Blake dropped the file onto the table and opened it. "Eyewitness places you near the convenience store around the time of the robbery," he said. "That's impossible," Nia replied quickly. "I was in class all day. I have teachers, students, even my bus driver who can back me up." Donnelly scoffed. "We've heard every excuse in the book. Smart mouths, fake IDs, kids who think they're above the law." "You're not special." Nia's hands clenched beneath the table. "Please," she said, barely holding herself together. "Just look at the badge. It's not fake. It's real. I was accepted into a CIA outreach program. I was on my way home. That's all." Blake flipped a page in the file, then looked up. "You think the CIA gives badges to high school kids?" "I'm not in high school. I graduated early. I'm going to Georgetown this fall," she said, her voice cracking despite her effort to stay composed. Donnelly stepped forward, his tone suddenly sharp. "We don't care where you say you're going. Right now, you're facing charges for armed robbery, and if you don't start talking, it's only going to get worse." "I am talking," she whispered. "You're just not listening." There was a long pause. The two officers looked at each other silently, deciding their next move. Finally, Donnelly leaned closer and growled, "Better think hard, sweetheart. The system doesn't take kindly to liars." They left her alone again, the door slamming shut behind them. The sound echoed through the room, sealing her inside the cold silence. Nia pressed her hands to her face, her fingers still trembling. Her entire body ached from the tension, the fear, the frustration, the humiliation. She had done everything right, worked hard, followed the rules, made her mother proud, and still here she was, locked up, judged, stripped of her dignity by two men who hadn't even bothered to ask her name. She didn't know how much time passed before the door opened again, this time revealing someone entirely different. A middle-aged black woman in a simple blazer, a gold badge clipped to her hip. Her eyes were calm but serious. "Miss Roberts?" she asked. Nia looked up slowly. "Yes, I'm Detective Yvonne Morgan," the woman said, stepping inside. "Let's get you processed and make that phone call." Nia followed her wordlessly down the corridor, every step feeling heavier than the last. Her wrists throbbed as Morgan finally removed the cuffs. The relief was physical, but the emotional wound was still raw. They stopped at a desk where her fingerprints were scanned again. A mugshot camera flashed. She blinked against the light. Finally, Detective Morgan pointed to an old payphone bolted to the wall. One call, she said. Nia didn't hesitate. She punched in the number she knew by heart. After 3 rings, she heard the familiar voice, her mother's voice. Hello, and just like that, the dam broke. Mama Nia whispered, choking back tears. They arrested me. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then came a sharp inhaler pause, so thick it felt like time itself was holding its breath. Where are you? Camille Roberts asked, her voice trembling but firm, holding back a wave of panic only a mother could mask. Nia clutched the receiver tighter, trying to speak through the lump forming in her throat. I'm at the precinct, she said. They think I robbed a store. Mom, I didn't do anything. Her voice cracked on the last word. Camille didn't respond right away, but Nia could hear her breathing, deep, measured, controlled. That meant she was already moving, already making calls, already on her way. By the time Camille and their family attorney, Mr. Charles Benton, arrived at the precinct, Nia had already spent another hour alone. She was back in the holding cell, curled against the cold steel bench, her eyes swollen from silent tears she refused to let fall in front of the officers. She sat up quickly as the door opened and 2 familiar figures entered. Camille's braid was slightly undone, her blouse wrinkled, but her presence was unwavering. She moved like a storm barely contained. Mr. Benton, tall and composed in his rumpled navy suit, looked furious. Nia's breath caught. Mama, she gasped, rising instinctively, before an officer barked at her to stay seated. Camille's hands pressed against the glass barrier that separated them. Her eyes dark and fierce locked onto her daughter's. Hold on, baby, she said, barely above a whisper. We're going to get you out of here. Mr. Benton turned to the officer guarding the room. I want a private word with my client, he said sharply. The guard hesitated, but eventually pointed to the back of the room. 5 minutes. Benton sat opposite Nia at a small metal table, pulling out a stack of legal papers from his briefcase. Nia listened carefully. He said, his tone low but urgent. Do not say anything else to anyone in this building unless in present. No explanations, no responses, just silence. Understand? Nia nodded quickly, swallowing hard. Her mother stood just a few feet behind Benton, wringing her hands but saying nothing. Benton leaned in. They claim there's an eyewitness, a man named Travis Reed, who says he saw you running from the robbery scene. Nia shook her head. That's not true. I was in class. The store's on Jefferson Avenue, right? I've never even been there. Benton nodded. We're going to prove that. But they're also claiming your badge is fake. It's not, she said quickly, eyes wide. It's from the CIA internship. It's real. I believe you, Benton replied. But that badge in their hands makes things worse until we get a confirmation. Right now, they have enough to justify holding you through the night, maybe longer. Lest we act fast. Camille stepped forward, her voice trembling. You can't just leave her here. She's a child. She's 19, the officer reminded coldly. She's my child. Camille shot back, every syllable laced with fury. Benton raised a hand gently. Ill file for an emergency hearing, first thing in the morning. But we need more than just her word, Nia. We need names, teachers, classmates, the bus driver, anyone who can place you at school during the time of the robbery. Nia sat up straighter, her voice steadier now. My debate coach, Ms. Harper. Shall know. And Mrs. Thompson, my physics teacher. And the driver's name is Roy. He drops me off on that corner every day at 3:15 p.m. Good, Benton said, jotting it down quickly. Well, reach out to all of them tonight. As the officer tapped his watch, signaling their time was up, Camille pressed her palm to the glass again. I love you, she mouthed. I love you too, Nia mouthed back, pressing her own hand against the barrier, trying to absorb the strength her mother was silently sending her. Hours crawled by. At some point, Detective Morgan, calm, professional, and perhaps the only one who had shown Nia a shred of decency, returned to her cell. This time she didn't speak much. She simply placed a small bottle of water and a packet of crackers through the slot in the door, then left again without a word. Nia clutched the bottle, the coolness seeping into her palms. She drank slowly, trying to steady her nerves. She didn't cry again. She couldn't afford to. Instead, she lay back against the bench and stared at the ceiling, replaying the events in her head like a courtroom transcript. Every detail mattered. Every second counted. Would the CIA stand by her? Would they verify her badge? Would her teachers and friends come through in time? Her mind whirled with fear and uncertainty, but somewhere deep inside, beneath the confusion, the humiliation, and the anger, was a sliver of something stronger. Resolve. She wouldn't let this break her. She wouldn't let this define her. She had worked too hard, fought too long. They picked the wrong girl to silence. The morning came gray and heavy with clouds blanketing the DC skyline like a curtain drawn over the day. A sheriff's deputy arrived at Nia's cell before sunrise, announcing in a flat voice that she would be transported to the federal courthouse for arraignment. The handcuffs were reapplied tighter this time, and her wrists already raw from the night before flinched at the cold steel. She was loaded into a transport van alongside two other women, both older and silent, their faces hardened by experience. No one spoke during the ride. The hum of the engine, the rattle of chains, and the occasional distant siren were the only sounds. Through the small barred window, Nia caught fleeting glimpses of the city she had once walked with pride. Now every street corner looked different, like a stranger's version of her world. By the time they arrived, the courthouse steps were already swarming with reporters. Cameras flashed like lightning. Microphones were aimed at every arriving official. Her name was now public. Someone had leaked the story, teen accused of armed robbery claims CIA internship defense, and it was spreading fast. She kept her head down as they led her through a side entrance, shielding her from the press. Inside, the courthouse felt too grand, too polished. Marble floors, high ceilings, brass railings. The building reeked of authority. A bailiff led her into a holding area where she saw a familiar face, Mr. Benton, her attorney standing tall and calm, a folder of documents tucked under his arm. "You ready?" he asked. Nia swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded. Yes. The courtroom was already half filled when they entered. On one side sat Camille, her mother, gripping a tissue in one hand and a copy of Nia's acceptance letter in the other. A few of Nia's teachers had also come along with her debate coach, Ms. Harper, and Roy, the school bus driver who tipped his cap when he saw her enter. On the other side was the state's team led by Assistant District Attorney Branson, a sharp-faced woman in a gray suit who looked as if she had already written the ending of this case in her mind. "All rise," the bailiff called as Judge Eleanor Hamilton entered. Everyone stood. The judge, a seasoned black woman with short gray hair and a gaze like steel, took her seat and scanned the room. "Be seated." The clerk read the charges aloud. "Nia Roberts, you are charged with armed robbery, obstruction of justice, and possession of a falsified federal ID." Nia sat motionless, her heart pounding. When asked for her plea, she answered with unwavering clarity, "Not guilty." Ada Branson stood to make her opening remarks. "Your Honor, the prosecution has strong evidence placing Ms. Roberts near the scene of the robbery. A witness identified her, and the badge she presented claiming CIA affiliation is unverifiable at this time. We believe this was an attempt to mislead law enforcement." Mr. Benton rose slowly, buttoning his jacket. "Your Honor, Ms. Roberts is a scholarship student bound for Georgetown University. She is a participant in a federally sponsored youth internship program through the CIA. The badge she carried is authentic. Furthermore, we have multiple witnesses who can confirm her location at the time of the alleged robbery." Judge Hamilton looked between them. "Let's proceed with witness testimony." The prosecution called Officer Donnelly to the stand first. He gave a polished account of how Nia had seemed suspicious, how she had acted evasively, and how her badge appeared clearly fake. When Benton cross-examined, the tone shifted. "Officer Donnelly, did Ms. Roberts resist arrest?" "She didn't run," he said slowly, "but she looked like she might." Benton raised an eyebrow. "So she complied with your commands?" "Yes," Donnelly admitted reluctantly. "Yet you classified her as a flight risk based on appearance alone." Donnelly fidgeted. "We had to act fast." Next came Travis Reed, the so-called eyewitness. He claimed he saw a young woman in a black hoodie running from the convenience store after the alarm went off. Benton approached the stand, cool and calculated. "Mr. Reed, what day did this occur?" "Thursday. You work at Dorsey's auto shop, correct?" Yes, interesting, Benton said, flipping a paper. Because your employer confirmed you were clocked in at 2:00 p.m., 20 blocks from the crime scene. And the store was robbed at 2:15. A ripple passed through the courtroom. Reed stammered, "Two must have been mistaken." Or you weren't there at all, Benton said, stepping back. Finally, the defense presented its case. Ms. Harper, Mrs. Thompson, and Roy all testified that Nia had been at school during the time of the robbery. Then the final witness entered quietly, Director Harrington, a stern, composed woman in a navy blue suit. She was from the CIA's Youth Outreach Division. Under oath, she confirmed Nia Roberts is indeed enrolled in our federal internship program. The badge in her possession is legitimate. Gasps filled the courtroom. Judge Hamilton leaned forward, her voice decisive and unwavering. In light of the credible alibi, federal confirmation, and inconsistencies in the prosecution's case, this court finds no grounds to continue. Case dismissed. The gavel struck. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Camille burst into tears. Mr. Benton smiled for the first time that morning, and Nia sat perfectly still, her face unreadable. Then she rose, turned to face Officers Donnelly and Blake at the back of the room, and walked out of the courtroom with her head held high. Outside the courthouse, the sun blazed brighter than it had all week, as if the sky itself had been holding back, until justice finally spoke. The steps were packed with reporters, cameras, clicking voices shouting, and live feeds rolling. Nia blinked against the light. It felt surreal, this sudden explosion of noise, this sea of microphones aimed at her face. But she kept moving, flanked by Mr. Benton and her mother, Camille, who placed a protective hand on her back. Ms. Roberts, do you have anything to say? Were the charges completely fabricated? Is the CIA actually backing you? Nia didn't answer. Not yet. She wasn't ready, not for sound bites, not for headlines. The courtroom might have cleared her name, but she still felt the bruises of what had been taken. Her sense of safety, her dignity, her faith in the system. All of it had been shaken, and though the verdict had restored her freedom, the scars hadn't vanished. At home that evening, things were quieter but no less heavy. Camille poured her daughter a mug of chamomile tea and wrapped her in the old quilt they kept on the couch. The house smelled like lemon oil and lavender, the scent of comfort of home. Nia sat quietly, hands wrapped around the mug, trying to let the warmth sink in. You did it, Camille whispered, kneeling beside her. You made it through. But Nia didn't nod. Not yet. Her eyes were distant, trained on something invisible. I almost lost everything, Mama, she said softly, and they would have let it happen without blinking. Camille reached for her hand and squeezed. So what are you going to do now? Nia didn't hesitate. I'm going to fight back, and she did. With Mr. Benton's guidance, she filed a civil lawsuit not just against Sergeant Donnelly and Officer Blake, but against the precinct, the city, and the system that had allowed it to happen. The grounds were clear: false arrest, civil rights violations, emotional distress, and defamation. Once the lawsuit was filed, the media reaction was explosive. Headlines popped up across every major platform. CIA intern sues DC police after being wrongfully arrested. Teen cleared in courtroom, officers face federal civil rights charges. Young black woman takes on corrupt system and wins. Some outlets painted her as a modern-day Rosa Parks. Others accused her of chasing attention, spinning conspiracy theories, or using race for sympathy. But Nia didn't respond to any of it. She didn't need to. She let the facts speak. As the case progressed, something unexpected began to happen. Other stories surfaced. Other young black men and women came forward, sharing eerily similar accounts, being stopped without cause, accused based on vague descriptions, denied phone calls, mistreated while in custody. One woman had lost her college admission. A young man had been expelled from his school. One by one, their voices added to the rising chorus. Mr. Benton compiled their stories into a supplemental brief supporting a larger systemic claim, a pattern of racial profiling and abuse within the department. Detective Yvonne Morgan, who had quietly helped Nia during her time in custody, volunteered to speak on record. She shared her own frustrations with the culture of silence inside the department. The pressure was mounting. The city opened an internal investigation. Records were pulled, body cam footage reviewed, disciplinary files unearthed. What emerged was a pattern, a long trail of misconduct, cover-ups, and unjustified stops that stretched back over a decade. Then came the tipping point. Travis Reed, the man who had falsely testified against Nye, agreed to testify again. This time he admitted the truth under oath. He had been paid by Donnelly and Blake to lie. The confession shattered any remaining defense the officers had. Public outrage followed. Donnelly and Blake were both suspended pending criminal investigation. Their personnel records revealed prior complaints of excessive force and discriminatory behavior that had been quietly buried. Faced with overwhelming evidence, the city chose to settle. Nia received a financial settlement that covered her full college tuition, housing, and more. But far more important than money, the settlement included a public apology and, under mounting civic pressure, major reforms, mandatory body cam enforcement on all officers, racial bias training implemented quarterly, an independent civilian oversight board with real authority to investigate misconduct, new leadership at the precinct. The old guard was out. The victory was undeniable, but Nia never treated it like a moment of celebration. To her, it wasn't just about clearing her name. It was about making sure no other young black student was ever dragged from their future the way she had been. She returned to school in early August to complete her finals. Her classmates whispered in the hallway, some curious, some awkward, most unsure of what to say. A few approached her in private with words of support. Her teachers, however, welcomed her back with open arms. Ms. Harper pulled her aside after class and said, "You were already a leader, Nia. Now you're a symbol." One day between classes, Nia received a quiet message on her phone. It was from Director Harrington at the CIA. The text was simple: "We're proud of you. Stay focused. The future needs you." Nia smiled, tucked the phone away, and kept walking, her backpack a little heavier, her steps a little stronger. She wasn't just carrying books anymore. She was carrying the weight of something bigger, and she was ready for whatever came next. The morning Nia moved into her dorm at Georgetown University was humid and buzzing with energy. Students laughed as they lugged mini fridges across the lawn. Parents shouted instructions from beneath car trunks, and RAs in bright t-shirts guided families to assigned buildings. The air smelled like cut grass and nervous anticipation, familiar but foreign. For most students, it was a fresh start. For Nia Roberts, it was a continuation of something far deeper. She wasn't just stepping into a university, she was stepping into her next battlefield. She stood outside her residence hall with her mother Camille beside her. Her suitcase sat at her feet, scuffed from the journey, but still strong just like her. Camille adjusted Nia's collar and smiled. "They have no idea what kind of storm just walked onto this campus," she said softly. Nia chuckled. "Let's keep it that way for now." They hugged tightly, neither wanting to let go. Camille finally stepped back. "Call me tonight." "I will," Nia said, then turned and entered the building. Her dorm room was small but clean. A twin bed, a wooden desk, a wardrobe, and a window that looked out onto a shaded courtyard. She unpacked methodically, placing framed photos on the desk, one of her and Camille, one with her debate team, and one of her holding the CIA internship badge still in its protective leather sleeve. The badge wasn't just a credential anymore. It was a reminder of what she had survived, of the courtroom battles, of the false arrest, the humiliation, the injustice, and the strength that had risen from it all. Classes started 2 days later. In the lecture halls, Nia blended in easily among her peers. She raised her hand in ethics class, dominated in political theory debates, and quietly took notes in economics. But some students recognized her. Whispers followed her across campus. "That's her, the girl from the news. The one with the lawsuit, the CIA badge." Most students never asked her directly. A few sent anonymous messages of support to her campus email. Others stared and said nothing. But Nia didn't come to Georgetown to be a celebrity. She came to build a study law, to understand the systems, to challenge them from within, and eventually to change them. At night, when the campus quieted down, she would walk the tree-lined paths near the law school earbuds and head clear. That's when she would think about the others, those who never got the chance to speak, the ones whose stories never reached the courtroom or the press. People who had been silenced by a system that didn't care. One evening, Mr. Benton called her with an update. "The Oversight Board is expanding. Your case has become a model for internal reform." "That's good," she said. "But it's not enough." He chuckled. "I figured you'd say that." A few days later, she was invited to speak at a town hall meeting hosted by the Georgetown Center for Civil Rights. At first, she hesitated. The idea of reliving everything in front of a crowd made her stomach twist. But then she thought about the girl she had been in that holding cell, scared, cold, silent, and she knew what she had to do. That Saturday, the room was filled with students, faculty, local community leaders, and journalists. Nia stood behind the podium in a simple white blouse, jeans, and the same black boots she had worn the day she was released from court. She looked out at the faces, some curious, others moved. She took a breath. "My name is Nia Roberts. I'm a student here at Georgetown. I'm also a daughter, a debate kid, a coffee addict, and a former defendant in a robbery case I didn't commit." The room fell silent. For hours, I sat in a cold cell with cuffs digging into my wrists while officers mocked my achievements. I wasn't just wrongly accused. I was erased. Erased of my name, my accomplishments, my humanity. She paused. "But I'm still here. And I'm not just here to graduate. I'm here to dismantle the idea that young black women have to be extraordinary just to be believed." The applause was thunderous. After the event, students lined up to shake her hand to thank her, to share their own stories. Some professors pulled her aside to offer mentorship. A civil rights attorney handed her a card and said, "When you're ready, we'll make room for you." Back in her dorm that night, Nia sat at her desk and opened her laptop. Her inbox had new messages, one from Director Harrington. Subject, "Keep going, body. You stood for truth in court. Now stand for others. We're watching and cheering." Nia smiled, closed her laptop, and turned to the window. The courtyard below was quiet now. The same streets that had once judged her were now the ones she walked freely with her head high. She wasn't just a student anymore. She was a survivor, a truth teller, and a force rising from the ashes of injustice. And she was just getting started. Weeks turned into months. The leaves in Georgetown shifted from green to gold, then fell quietly to the ground, as if honoring the weight of the season. Nia walked those campus paths now with calm certainty, no longer haunted by the courtroom or the holding cell, but deeply shaped by them. She wasn't chasing headlines anymore. She was focused on her coursework, her advocacy, and her purpose. Her case had faded from the front pages, but its effects hadn't. A new citywide policy was named in her honor, the Roberts Protocol, mandating youth protections during detainment and transparency in identification checks. One crisp morning, she received a sealed letter from Langley. Inside was a formal offer, a continued track with the CIA's Youth Leadership Fellowship. They'd watched her. They'd seen her integrity, her clarity under pressure, her refusal to be silenced. She smiled, folded the letter, and tucked it beside the badge in her desk drawer. During a student panel that evening, someone asked her, "If you could go back and undo what happened, would you?" She paused, then answered with quiet conviction, "I wouldn't wish that pain on anyone, but I also wouldn't trade what I learned. I didn't just survive it. I turned it into something bigger than me." The audience went still, because they saw it now, not just the girl who had been wronged, but the woman she was becoming. A builder, a fighter, a leader. That night, Nia stood at her dorm window watching the lights of the city below. Somewhere out there, another young girl was being judged before being heard. And Nia Roberts was going to make sure the world listened. Nia Roberts' journey is a powerful reminder that dignity and truth don't depend on status, they come from within. In a world where prejudice can still outweigh evidence, her story teaches us the importance of standing firm, even when the system seems stacked against you. For older viewers who've lived through civil rights struggles, social upheavals, and shifting generations, this story echoes something familiar. The fight for respect and the courage to speak when silence would be easier. Nia's resilience shows that integrity and preparation are lifelong tools, whether you're facing injustice in a courtroom or simply striving to be heard in daily life. Her case also reminds us that mentorship matters. The presence of her mother, her teachers, her lawyer, and even one honest detective proves that change doesn't come from one voice alone, but from communities who choose to believe and act. In today's divided times, Nia's story is a quiet but profound call to remain vigilant, to uplift the next generation, and to ensure no one is ever dismissed because of the color of their skin, the zip code they come from, or the name on their ID. Justice, after all, is in a moment, it's a movement. Nia Roberts didn't ask to become a symbol. She simply wanted to walk home. But when the world tested her, she stood tall, not just for herself, but for every young person who's ever been silenced, doubted, or dismissed. If her courage moved you, if her fight reminded you of how far we've come and how far we still have to go, then don't let her story end here. Support her by sharing your thoughts below. What do you think needs to change in our justice system? What advice would you give to the next generation of leaders like Nia? Your voice matters, especially now. Let's fill the comments with wisdom, encouragement, and unity. And if you believe stories like Nia's deserve to be heard, not buried, then help us keep them alive. If you like this video, comment one below to show your support. Let's make sure Nia and everyone she represents knows they're not standing alone.